FDR, when he becomes president, is faced with two crises. An international crisis, the rise of nationalism and fascism, and what appears to be clearly a brewing war in Europe and Asia. But he's also, of course, faced with the Great Depression. FDR chooses to focus on the Great Depression. Hoover had demanded repayment from Europe and also a return to the gold standard. Hoover commits to the 1933 World Economic Conference, but by the time 1933 rolls around, FDR is the president. FDR goes to the conference, but FDR understands that the dollar has to be deflated, meaning it has to come down in value in order to compete in world markets. The dollar is just too costly to really be used as an effective means of international trade. And so he issues the bombshell message on April 5th of 1933. And what he says is that America will not be returning to the gold standard. We will instead use fiat currency, meaning currency that is not based on gold. He also says that he also forces people to sell their gold to the government, which has been a controversial move on FDR's part. FDR rejects the Dawes Plan and the rotating system of credit Hoover had created, where we loan money to Germany so they can pay back France and Britain so they can pay back us. And in fact, he signs a law banning American loans to nations who are in default on loans already. And the war debt payments just simply stop. We just don't get paid back for World War I. Russia wants to help with the Japan problem. And they also want recognition for their Soviet government. We've refused to recognize it. Remember, we invaded the Soviet Union in 1919 to try to stop the Soviets from taking over. We want to increase trade, so in November of 1933, we open up diplomatic relationships with Communist Russia. U.S.-Russian trade begins in the fall, or fails to come about, and America does nothing about Japan. The Russians are getting pretty upset because now they're surrounded by two threats, Japan and Germany. In Latin America, in December of 1933, Roosevelt's good neighbor policy says that no nation has a right to interfere with another nation at all. This is a much expanded version of the Roosevelt corollary, that he doesn't think any country should be getting involved in any other country's business. These are nostalgic times for many Americans today. World War I has come to be viewed as a corporate plot for profits, as a war that was fought to make money for the people who make money off of wars, the makers of guns and tanks and stuff. FDR wants to be involved in foreign affairs, but most Americans believe that America should stay out, isolationism, neutrality. Roosevelt tries to join the World Court, but Charles Coughlin, the radio priest, and William Randolph Hearst, the great newspaper editor, will lead the charge to get it voted down so we don't join the World Court. As Mussolini plans to invade Ethiopia, the Senate works desperately to keep America from getting involved. And the Neutrality Act of 1935 mandates an arms embargoes of any warring state, so we cannot sell weapons to warring states. The 1937 cash and carry policy says we can only sell non-military goods. They have to be paid for up front and have to be shipped on the purchasing country's boats. So this is America trying to refuse to become pulled in to this growing global crisis. When the Spanish Civil War breaks out in 1936 and goes on into 1937, Hitler and Mussolini get involved on the side of the fascist dictator Francisco Franco, while the British, the French, and Americans refuse to get involved. This is isolationism, right? American volunteers do go over there and fight in this war, as I mentioned a few chapters ago, but America plays no significant role. This, by the way, is Salvador Dali's painting of his native Spain tearing itself apart. This is a Dadaist art, which Dali was one of the leaders of. In the summer of 1937, Japan takes 5 more provinces in northern China. FDR issues a speech calling for a quarantine of Japan, but the Senate refuses to do anything, and FDR gives it up. On December 12, 1937, the Japanese sink a U.S. ship, the Panay. We accept a nonsense story that it was an accident. It wasn't. They did it on purpose. But at this point, we're just not prepared for war. In 1936, Hitler rearms the Rhineland, the border of France and Germany, which the Treaty of Versailles had made it illegal for him to put troops into. Nobody does anything. In March of 1938, Hitler takes Austria. He calls it the Anschluss. He explains, the Austrian people want him to, by the way. It's a voluntary annexation. But nobody complains because the Austrians didn't seem to mind. In September of 1938, Hitler demands that Czechoslovakia give him a German part of Czechoslovakia, meaning it has Germans in it, called the Sudetenland. Czechoslovakia looks around to see if they have any support. They don't, so they give him the Sudetenland because they know they can't stand up to Hitler. At this point, the European powers demand a conference with Hitler to try to stop his expansion. And on September 29th of 1938, Neville Chamberlain oversees, he's the Prime Minister of Britain, a conference with Hitler in Munich. When he returns to England, he promises that he has signed a treaty that will guarantee peace in our time.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you. We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.